All right, so here we are doing tires. Now, I decided to do this as a time lapse, but I'm keeping it as a pretty slow time lapse just so you can really see what's going on. It's only double speed, so I'm not going to be zooming through this. So this is a time lapse, and I'm just narrating it, I guess. So I want to just preface this by saying that this is a very high poly way to do tires. Tires are very detailed, right? If you think of the knobs and everything. And so this is going to create a lot of geometry. And for that's one of the reasons that I decided to do this as a time lapse too. Also, just because I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do this. So here I'm just keeping track. I wrote that 30 down because I want to keep track of how many divisions that I have. Because at some point I'm going to need to figure out how many radial divisions that I need. So, and then I'm just trying to subdivide it up evenly. So I know I'm going to need a lot more divisions. So I'm just trying to subdivide it in a way that makes sense while keeping track of my divisions. So I subdivided it once. I think at some point I go back. So I do think that I go back and undo this at some point. But if you dig around on my YouTube channel, I have another method for doing tires with just textures, just using Photoshop for textures. So if you're a little intimidated by this or you want to keep the poly count low, I would recommend looking at that. And I'll post a link down in the description here for those series of videos. But this is honestly a way that I've not done tires yet. I had an idea to do things this way, and I just wanted to try it out. So that's kind of the reason I'm doing a time lapse here. So yeah, I'm keeping track of how many divisions I have. So right now I have up to 60, and then I divide it 2 more times after that. So I'm gonna keep 4 divisions. I'm gonna delete everything but 4. And hopefully you'll see what I mean by that in a second. I'm pretty sure I so 1, 2, 3, 4 divisions. So I'm keeping 4 of those divisions. But I'm still gonna, when I duplicate it back around, it's still gonna be 60 because it's basically that little slice of 60 divisions that's now divided up into 4. And I'm gonna go ahead and delete half of that. That way it's half the work. I don't have to do it all at once or do double the work, right? And then here I'm just kind of reducing down my polys because I don't feel like I don't need that many. And I'm kind of, inspecting the tire. I'm trying to be observant of how those shapes are and how those shapes are kind of skewed or twisted. And my idea here is that I can make these shapes straight, right, where they don't have any skewing or twisting to them. And then I can use a deformer at the end when I get them modeled to kind of rotate them and skew them in a specific way. So that's the general idea. And the end result turned out okay. If I did it again, it would probably be better because I kind of learned a few things with this technique. And like I said, I've never actually done tires this way. I just wanted to try something new. So yeah, and then here I keep hitting my F key by accident and it zooms way out when you have a component selected. So you're going to see me kind of zooming way out a lot, and that's just because I'm hitting that F key by accident. And here I'm realizing that I have edge flow turned on, so I jump back into my multi-cut tool and turn that off. And again, all this stuff that I'm doing right now, I actually end up going back and undoing it all and taking a slightly different approach to it. But that's my basic idea, and that's kind of why I drew those shapes up there at the top, because I'm trying to make those shapes straight, as if there's no like twisting in my tire. And then I'll use a deformer to twist it around. So I tried this a few different ways, and I honestly thought about just cutting this out and starting back, just kind of showing it streamlined. But I'm a fan of showing every little bit of it, right? Even the mistakes. So even though I wouldn't really consider this a mistake necessarily, it's just I did it, and then I didn't like the way that it looks, so I kind of back up and rethink it, and I even back up and rethink it again. Like, let me point out that this is my first time doing tires this way, so I'm doing a little bit of experimenting here, but it works out pretty well. Another way I've seen tires done in the past is kind of doing it a very similar way, where you basically model all your tread in a straight line, and then you can use a bend deformer to kind of bend it around in the shape of the tire. And I guess this is kind of like a hybrid of that, right? So we're using a very similar method that we used on the rims, where we're just modeling like one little pie slice of the rim, and then we end up duplicating it around. So yeah, a lot of this is just sort of me trying something, taking a look at it, saying to myself, I don't like that, and then going back and redoing it. I also think that in retrospect, if I had to do this again, I would probably make the treads a little bit smaller. So I would do like a narrower piece or narrower slice of the tire. Maybe instead of 60 divisions, do like 80 divisions, or probably 80. But like I said, this ends up not bad the way that it is. So I'm going to speed it up a little bit right here and kind of speed through this, because I do end up just undoing the whole thing. And I think eventually what I decide to do is to not worry about the little lines in there. That's something that I could probably do later in a texture if I really wanted to. But I think if you think about the tire wearing down over time, those little thin lines in there will probably eventually go away a little bit, or just be less noticeable. So ultimately, I decide to just back all the way up and just forego those little thin lines. But let me make a point and just say, you can put as much detail in this as you want, right? So you can dig as deep as you want, and you can use this method to put as many little tiny details in your tires as you want. I just kind of started to feel like doing those little thin lines might be a little bit overkill, so I decided not to do them and just focus on like the main shape of those knobs on the tire. So here I'm probably just thinking about what to do. And I take a very similar approach again. I just decide that I'm going to I'm not going to worry about those thin lines. So I'm trying to cut out the shape, kind of like cut out the outline of that shape that I want. And then I just extrude up. Add some subdivisions or some port edges. So when I smooth that surface, I think in retrospect, I would probably do this as something that I leave unsmoothed, and just bevel those corners, and not necessarily subdivide them in a way to do them smooth. And I may even go back and redo it that way. So just, might be something you want to keep in mind, right? Maybe not do this in a way where it's going to be subdivided, because it's got plenty of divisions as it is. And you may want to just do it in a way where you leave this one unsmooth, like our grill. And so you could put this in that unsmooth group. and just kind of bevel the hard corners. That might be a very good thing to do that I'm, just thinking about at the moment. So yeah, I'm just kind of blocking out those shapes, kind of like a, not quite sure, like a bottle shape almost. And this one has kind of like a rounded bottom corner there. So I'm just kind of making a little rounded corner there for that one. And again, I want to point out that this doesn't have to be super accurate to what you see, right? You can make up some details here and there if you want. I don't think you should kill yourself over trying to get this tire looking as physically accurate as you possibly can. I think it'll be fine if you do make up some things. Tires are very high frequency, right? So they have a lot of details in them. So they're kind of noisy in the fact that when you look at them, you just kind of see this noisy pattern, and you can be a little bit more free with high frequency details and noisy things, as opposed to like low frequency details, which are the big shapes. You want to get the big shapes as accurate as you possibly can, but the smaller you get with your details, you can be a little bit more careless about those details, if that makes sense. Right? As an example, if you're creating a character with wrinkles and pores, if you don't have those wrinkles and pores in the exact same place as your reference, it's not the end of the world, right? No one's really going to notice that those are a little bit off. So here I'm just kind of making a strip. And I'm doing it in a way where I only leave one little gap in between. So notice how I selected it all the way to the edge on one side, but I didn't select it all the way to the edge on another one. That's kind of intentional, because I just feel like it might be a little bit more interesting if I do something like that, where I kind of offset the gap a little bit. And now I'm just kind of figuring out the logistics of the edge flow polygons. All right, so now I'm going to work on that knob that sort of wraps around the corner of your tire. Basically making it the same way I made the other ones. I'm just doing it, much bigger, where it's wrapping around that corner. There's a couple times there I accidentally select an edge instead of a face, and I don't think it's a huge deal, but I don't want to accidentally extrude an edge and a face at the same time. So I want to make sure that I only have the faces selected and not the edges. And then here I'm just deleting that edge, because here it kind of just fades into the normal round profile of the tire. So I'm just kind of deleting that edge, so it kind of slopes into the round profile of the tire. Looking back on it, I could probably delete that other one as well, the next one up. But again, I think the results here turned out pretty good. So I'm not going to beat myself up about it. And again, here I'm just kind of figuring out where the support edges should go. Figuring out the logistics of the edge flow and everything. Making sure there's no N-gons or no unnecessary geometry. As a new user, you should use Mesh Cleanup quite a bit to find N-gons and stuff. You'll notice that I don't use it very often. And that's, honestly, that's just because I've been using Maya for 20 years and I've been modeling in Maya for 20 years. So it's not, I'm pretty good at keeping my n-gons and non-manifold geometry to a minimum as I'm modeling. But as someone new to modeling and you're just learning how to model, you should be running that mesh cleanup function constantly as you're modeling, just to check for n-gons. Yeah, it's one of those things that I wish I could show myself using it more often, because I want to encourage my students and my mentees, so to speak, on to use that mesh cleanup function as much as possible. But I just, in my normal day-to-day work, I don't use it as often. So here I'm just doing some math. So I had 60 divisions, and so I divide 360 by 60, and I get 6. So that's how many degrees I need to rotate this to obviously get 60 copies back. So I think you saw me do it the wrong way once, so I'm going to just go back to my duplicate special, and we're going to do 6 degrees and 59 copies because I already have one, and obviously that's the wrong direction, so it's going to be 60 in X and not 60 in Z. And then there's all my duplicates, and if I did this correctly, they should all just be perfectly lined up, so it just should be a matter of selecting all those verts, or combining my whole object together, selecting the verts. Here, I just realized that I want to delete that edge right there. And so I just back up and do it on the individual slice rather than doing it on every single one, right? So I'm just trying to minimize the amount of work I have to do. And then I just duplicate it back around. I grab all these guys and do a mesh combine. Grab all the verts and merge the verts together. And this is getting to pretty high poly count, right? So whenever we hit 3 on the keyboard, we're just going to get a little warning from Maya that says, are you sure you want to do this? Because this is a lot of polygons to subdivide. But it's usually okay. Maya can handle, a couple million polygons, no problem. When you get above, I would say like 10 million polys, then it's probably going to start chugging. Or even 5 million, it's probably going to start chugging a little bit. So then I duplicate over the other half and I combine it, and then I grab all those center verts, scale them in and merge them together. And then once again, I'm just going to do a smooth to kind of take a look at it, make sure that merged up together. So now what I'm going to do is use a deformer. So I'm going to use a lattice deformer. And I'm going to set my S divisions. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these divisions one at a time and just rotate them a little bit. And that will give me like the skewing, or the sort of the offset, or the skewing of those tire treads, which you'll see here in a moment. Another thing that I may end up doing at some point to my tire is doing another lattice deformer and changing the shape of it a little bit. I do something, I'll point it out when I do it, but I do something that I ended up not liking when I look at it after the fact. But yeah, so here I'm in my front view and I'm just selecting each row of lattice points. And I'm just so I select them in my front view and then I rotate them in my perspective view, so I can kind of get an idea of how that's affecting all of those individual tire treads. Right. This lattice deformer is something that I actually like using quite a bit in different situations, but it's a really good way to just deform your entire model. There's probably another way to do this, but I like using the lattice deformer. So I get that looking pretty good, and then I'm going to delete the history which will commit the changes. So the lattice deformer goes away. But then I create another lattice deformer. And I end up rounding out the tire. And I think this is a little bit of a mistake, right? So not this one in particular right here, but when I select that center one and bump that up, I don't like the way that turned out overall. So I may end up going back and changing that again with another lattice deformer, just because it gives it like a bump in the center of the tire, which I didn't really like. But overall, I think that turned out pretty well. And then here, I'm just going to add a little kind of extrusion around the entire tire, just to kind of see how it looks. Now, of course, there's like writing on the sidewall and size and stuff like that. You could do this in the model. You could certainly model all that stuff in, but I think it's a little overkill, and it's probably better off if we just do that in the texture or in like with a displacement or a bump map. But you could absolutely just model the all the lettering on there. It would just be a lot of work. You wouldn't necessarily have to model it in the tire. You could just have it kind of sitting above the tire, so it's not actually the same object, if that makes sense. So you don't necessarily need to like connect all the vertices and stuff. But you could model the same thing with the treads, right? You could just make the treads where they're sitting kind of above the tire surface and not actually going in. It's just, again, there's 100 different ways to do anything in these 3D apps. So, but overall, I think that turned out okay. I think in retrospect, I may have done them a little bit smaller because it looks pretty knobby. But that's okay. I think that once I add the roof rack and stuff to this, I think it might add to the aesthetic that I'm going for this car. But overall, I think that's a pretty good tire. And you can kind of see a little bit how the very center of that tire kind of bulges out a little bit, and I just don't like that. So now I'm doing I'm just going to do a thumbnail render, and I end up duplicating it over. And the first time I kind of mess up that duplicate. So I end up, doing duplicate special and just doing an instance. And moving that over. Again, just to mention again, at some point, we're going to do like a part of this that will cover up all of those blank areas, right? Where all the gaps and everything where we can see through. After we kind of finish the entire exterior of the body, we're going to model some stuff to kind of clean it up a little bit so we don't see all the gaps. Now, at some point, I would like to do like the undercarriage and the interior of the car. But I think after I do the exterior here, I'm going to take a little bit of a break and do some other things. I would like to get back into Cinema 4D and learn some more personal projects. So I've been kind of slaving away at this series. So I think after I finish the exterior of the car, we'll take a break, but we'll get to the undercarriage and the interior at some point, and texturing and UVing and all that good stuff. So here I'm just finishing up a thumbnail render, and that's it for the tires, and we'll see you in the next video.